In the quiet glow of early morning, the camera drifts through a small Athenian garden, dew trembling on the edges of leaves, sunlight just beginning to warm the stones. A gentle voice rises. Aristotle believed that a good life is not discovered in grand victories or dramatic moments, but in the small, deliberate choices we make each day. The scene softens, light settling over the courtyard like a slow breath. And then the guiding question unfolds. What does it mean to live well? Not perfectly, but wisely? The garden fades as the journey begins. The story of Aristotle begins not in a grand academy, nor in the marble halls where his ideas would one day echo, but in a small coastal town called Stagira, a place of sea wind, open fields, and wide, unhurried skies. It is here, in this quiet corner of northern Greece, that a boy first learns to watch the world. And long before he becomes the great philosopher, long before his name becomes synonymous with logic and wisdom, he is simply a child, curious, observant, and filled with a gentle restlessness. Aristotle loses his parents young. His father, Nicomachus, a doctor to kings, leaves behind medical texts and instruments the boy does not yet understand. His mother, Festus, known for her kindness, disappears from his life too soon. And so Aristotle learns an early truth. The world is fragile. Life changes. Nothing is guaranteed. But instead of closing himself off, he opens even more widely. Loss, for him, becomes a doorway into deeper seeing. He begins to wander the hills of Stagira alone, not out of loneliness but out of fascination. While other children play games, he crouches by riverbanks watching how water curls around stones. He traces the patterns of ants and bees, observing how they organize themselves, how they cooperate without being told. No movement is too small for his attention. No creature is beneath his curiosity. He watches the stars at night, the slow turning of constellations, and wonders not only what they are, but why they move. His questions multiply like constellations themselves, infinite, interconnected, shimmering in the dark. People in Stagira whisper affectionately about the boy who asks too many questions. His tutors say he has a mind like a net that catches everything. But what they do not yet see is that Aristotle's curiosity is not mere habit. It is the foundation of his philosophy. For him, wisdom is not the memorization of truths. It is the ongoing search, the willingness to sit with uncertainty until it reveals its shape. When he turns 17, Aristotle travels to Athens, the intellectual heart of the ancient world. The journey is long, but his excitement outshines exhaustion. He has heard of Plato's Academy, a place where ideas grow like vines on stone walls, twisting, stretching, reaching toward heaven. The thought of it sparks something electric inside him. But even here, in the bustle of Athens, life moves slowly enough for wonder. Aristotle arrives not as a prodigy, not as a rising star, but as someone ready to learn. He enters the academy quietly, almost reverently. He listens before he speaks. He observes before he judges. And little by little, his childhood habits become philosophical methods. He asks, why does a fish swim the way it does? Why does a seed always reach upward? Why do humans seek happiness? What is the purpose behind anything? Behind everything? These questions, which sprouted from the soil of Stagira's fields, begin to shape themselves into the roots of his life's work. For Aristotle believes that nothing exists without a reason. Every creature, every object, every motion carries within it a kind of destiny. The world is not a collection of random accidents. It is an orchestra, and he is determined to understand its music. In Athens, he continues observing as he always has. He walks through markets studying how people bargain, smile, sigh, argue. He visits theaters, watching how characters behave, how emotions swell and fall. He studies animals with the same seriousness he brings to the study of stars. To understand life, he believes, one must look directly and honestly at life itself. Yet Aristotle is not simply a collector of facts. He is a seeker of meaning. He wants to know the why that pulses beneath the what. And this desire, born in childhood, is what will eventually lead him to define the very nature of happiness, ethics, purpose, and human flourishing. It is important to remember that Aristotle does not begin with certainty. He begins with wonder, with humility, with a quiet belief that understanding requires patience. In this way, he teaches us something essential, that wisdom is not found in answers given by others, but in questions we dare to ask ourselves. Some evenings, he lies on the academy steps, looking up at the sky the way he did as a boy. He still wonders why the stars move, why the world exists at all, why human beings are never satisfied with simple survival, but instead search for meaning, order, beauty. The same questions that comforted him as a child now sharpen, deepen, and expand. And as the world continues to unfold before him, Aristotle notices a profound pattern. Everything in nature seeks to fulfill its potential. Seeds become trees. Caterpillars become butterflies. Humans, too, become something if they choose to. From this observation, he slowly begins to shape one of his most enduring ideas, that the good life is not given. It is grown, cultivated through daily choices, habits, and actions. Aristotle's early years teach him that wisdom is not an inheritance, nor a sudden revelation. It is a practice. There are paying close attention to the world and to oneself. It is the patience to observe how things change. It is the willingness to ask questions that have no easy answers. And so, from a quiet child who once watched insects and stars, emerges the philosopher who will one day teach the world how to live well, not perfectly, not without pain, but with intention and clarity. The sun rises slowly over Athens, brushing the pale stone streets with a warmth that feels almost ancient. In the northern part of the city stands a grove of trees, quiet, welcoming, touched by the soft humming of cicadas. This is the Lyceum, the place where Aristotle would reshape the way the world thinks. But it is not a school in the way we imagine today. There are no rigid classrooms, no lecterns, no silent rows of desks. Instead, there are pathways, simple, dusty, winding paths through the shade of trees, and on them, people walk. Aristotle believed that the mind moves best when the body moves with it. So the Lyceum became a school of walkers, students wandering in pacing circles, teachers explaining ideas as their robes swayed to the rhythm of their footsteps. To think was to move, and to move was to observe. Nothing was too small for attention. A shifting leaf in the breeze, a beetle crossing a stone, the shape of a cloud, the laugh of a child, the arc of a thrown pebble. The world itself was the classroom. The Lyceum was alive with conversation. Not arguments, not debates in the modern sense, but gentle inquiries, questions, provisional answers, and then more questions. Aristotle did not push his students to memorize doctrines. He encouraged them to look. To understand life, he suggested, one must begin by watching it. And so they watched how animals moved, how shadows shifted throughout the day, how people behaved when happy or frightened or ashamed. The Lyceum had a rhythm, almost like breathing. In the morning, the philosophical discussions began. Ethics, logic, the nature of the human good. In the middle of the day, Aristotle might be seen examining plants, sketching diagrams, recording the details of anatomy. By evening, conversation returned again, quieter now, touching on poetry, friendship, the meaning of happiness. Knowledge did not live in one place. It arrived from every direction. Aristotle's students learned that philosophy was not something one locked away inside books. It was something lived, something practiced, something shaped by attention. To understand virtue, one must observe how good people act. To understand courage, one must watch soldiers, children, mothers, anyone who meets fear and steps forward. To understand anger, one must feel it, question it, comment, and see how it fades. Every emotion, every decision, every passing moment held a lesson. Aristotle was meticulous in this collecting of experience. He cataloged animals, plants, human behaviors, political systems, and rhetorical techniques. To him, the world was overflowing with clues about how to live well. But those clues were scattered, pieces of a vast mosaic. Only careful observation could bring them into harmony. Walking through the Lyceum, students often found him with small notebook, writing not lofty metaphysical truths, but simple details, the way a horse breathes before it gallops, the way friends laugh when they trust one another, the way a person changes when treated with kindness. These observations became building blocks for his philosophy. For Aristotle believed that wisdom grows first from the ground, not the sky. In the Lyceum, no question was too humble. Why do people enjoy music? What makes a friendship last? How does a seed know how to become a tree? The students learned that philosophy did not remove them from life. It pushed them deeper into it. Each answer they discovered did not close a door. It opened several more. Aristotle taught that to live well, one must first see clearly. And to see clearly, one must slow down. Notice patterns. Notice contradictions. Notice oneself. A person who never pauses, he felt, rushes past meaning without recognizing it. So the Lyceum's pace was deliberate. No hurry. No urgency. Just steady, thoughtful exploration. In this quiet rhythm, Aristotle shaped one of his most important ideas, that happiness, we call eudaimonia, is not a moment of pleasure or a stroke of luck. It is a way of living, a habit, a series of choices practiced daily. He saw that a good life is crafted step by step, like a path walked every morning. It requires balance, intention, and above all, an honest awareness of oneself. Just as his students walked the Lyceum's paths, slowly forming a circle in the dust, Aristotle believed people walked the path of character, each action pressing a deeper imprint. The Lyceum became a space where this idea could be practiced. Students trained themselves to observe not just the world, but their own impulses, when they felt jealous, when they felt hopeful, when they wanted more than they needed. Philosophy here was a mirror showing each person who they were becoming. Aristotle often reminded them that no one becomes virtuous by accident. Just as one becomes a musician by practicing the lyre, or an athlete by practicing strength, one becomes good by practicing good acts. Virtue was not theory. It was discipline, repetition, a kind of inner craftsmanship. And like all crafts, it required time. In the soft air of the Lyceum, among olive trees and worn pathways, Aristotle gave the world a radical idea. That wisdom is physical. That thinking begins in the senses. That clarity is born in movement, conversation, and patient attention. The students learned that philosophy was not an escape from the world, but a deeper entrance into it. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the garden, Aristotle would sometimes conclude the day with a simple reminder, one that captured the spirit of the Lyceum perfectly. To understand life, walk with it. Here, philosophy did not sit still. It wandered. It breathed. It lived. Aristotle would often pause in the middle of a walk, lift his hand towards something simple, a leaf, a stone, the arc of a bird's wing, and ask his students to look again. Nature, he said, rarely chooses extremes. The world around them moved in patterns of balance. The river flowed neither too fast nor too slow. The seasons turned in steady rhythm. Even the human heart beat in a measured cadence, neither frantic nor lethargic. In this gentle order, Aristotle sensed a truth that will become one of the foundations of his philosophy, that the good life is not a life of excess, nor one of deprivation, but one lived in a clear, steady middle. He called this ideal the golden mean, a phrase that sounds simple, almost comfortable, yet carries within it the profound challenge of moderation. For Aristotle, virtue was not a mysterious gift reserved for the wise. It was a habit, a cultivated way of being. A person becomes good not through luck or divine blessing, but through the daily, deliberate shaping of the self. But what did this mean in practice? Aristotle explained to his students that every human quality runs on a spectrum. Consider courage, he would say. At one extreme is recklessness, the soldier who charges blindly into danger, confusing impulse for bravery. At the other is cowardice, the one who flees every challenge, paralyzed by fear. Between these two, like a door gently swinging open, lies true courage, the willingness to face danger with thoughtfulness, to step forward because it is right, not because it is easy or dramatic. Likewise, generosity sits between wastefulness and stinginess. A generous person gives with intention, neither throwing wealth away in thoughtless bursts of pride nor holding it so tightly that it becomes a burden. Generosity is not measured by the amount, Aristotle would say, but by the spirit in which it is given. The golden mean is the art of knowing when enough is enough, and when enough becomes too much. Even kindness, a virtue that feels naturally soft, lives somewhere between indifference and indulgence. Too little, and we become cold. Too much, and our boundaries dissolve. Aristotle recognized what many modern thinkers rediscovered centuries later, that genuine kindness includes saying no, setting limits, and protecting one's integrity. Virtue, after all, is not a performance, it is alignment. As Aristotle taught these ideas under the shade of the Lyceum's colonnades, his students would often fall into thoughtful silence. Moderation is not glamorous. It asks for patience, discernment, self-awareness, qualities that grow slowly, like roots deepening beneath the soil. It requires pausing before speaking, reflecting before acting, and understanding that doing less can sometimes be wiser than doing more. But Aristotle did not imagine the golden mean as a rigid rule, the same for every person. Virtue, he argued, is relative to the individual. What is courage and moderation for a trained soldier is not the same as for a frightened child. The right amount of anger for a parent defending their child differs from that of a citizen reacting to a political debate. The ethical life is attentive, responsive, alive to context. This is why Aristotle believed that living well requires phronesis, or practical wisdom, the inner compass that guides us toward the middle path when the world pulls us toward extremes. Unlike mathematical knowledge, practical wisdom cannot simply be taught. It must be developed through living, through trying, failing, adjusting. Wisdom grows not from perfection, but from presence. There is a quiet beauty in this approach. Aristotle does not demand sainthood or extraordinary moral feats. He asks for something gentler: balance, awareness, and intentionality. The golden mean is not about being average. It is about being aligned with one's deepest purpose and values. It is a way of living that brings harmony rather than turbulence, clarity rather than chaos. Consider speech, for example. Too much candor becomes cruelty. Too little becomes dishonesty. The virtuous voice speaks truth, but in a way that nurtures. In this, Aristotle subtly anticipates what modern psychologists call emotional intelligence. Long before anyone coined the term, Aristotle understood that the inner life shapes the outer world. And what about pleasure? Here, Aristotle diverged from his teacher, Plato. Pleasure, he believed, is not inherently wrong. It becomes harmful only when pursued without moderation. Joy is part of the good life, so long as it is woven into a larger tapestry of meaning and responsibility. A life of only pleasure is shallow. A life without pleasure is inhuman. The golden mean reminds us that living well is not about denial, but about integration. As the sun would filter through the branches of the Lyceum, Aristotle would gesture to the path beneath their feet. Virtue, he told his students, is like walking. One foot moves forward, the other follows. You sway slightly to one side, then the other, constantly adjusting. But as long as you continue, with awareness and intention, you remain on your way. The golden mean is not a destination. It is a practice, a lifelong tuning of the self toward harmony. And perhaps that is why Aristotle's ethics feel so comforting today. In a world where extremes dominate headlines and emotions swing wildly with every new crisis, the idea of a middle path seems almost radical. Aristotle reminds us that wisdom does not shout. It does not demand spectacle. It grows quietly, like a small flame sheltered from the wind, steady and warm. To live well, he tells us, is to recognize that the soul, like a lyre, requires tuning. Too tight, and the strings break. Too loose, and the melody fades. But with balance, careful, intentional balance, music arises. A life lived in the golden mean is not perfect, but it is whole. And in that wholeness lies the gentle, enduring wisdom Aristotle hoped to share. That meaning is crafted one choice at a time, each one a step toward the person we are slowly becoming. Aristotle believed that a meaningful life was not something granted, inherited, or discovered all at once. It was something shaped, slowly, deliberately, by the quiet rhythm of our daily choices. For him, character was not a lightning strike of inspiration, nor a gift handed down by the gods. It was a sculpture carved through routine, through repetition, through the ordinary actions we perform when no one is watching. In the gentle light of the Lyceum mornings, he would walk among his students and remind them that virtue is not a moment, but a pattern. We are what we repeatedly do, he would say, the words falling softly like steady footfalls on the courtyard stone. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And in those simple lines, he offered a philosophy more practical and more compassionate than any grand doctrine about fate or destiny. Because habits, Aristotle believed, were democratic, available to anyone. They did not rely on wealth, or birth, or brilliance. They required only willingness, the willingness to practice goodness the way one practices an instrument, or a craft, or a garden. One seed at a time, one gesture at a time, one breath at a time. He taught that virtue was not a heroic leap but a gentle alignment, a consistent return, again and again, to the kind of person we hope to become. Courage does not bloom on the battlefield first. It appears in the small moments, in admitting a mistake, in telling a difficult truth, and standing steady when our instinct is to flee. Generosity does not begin with grand donations, but with offering attention, offering time, offering a warm word when silence might be easier. Patience grows not in moments of calm, but in moments that strain us. Kindness, too, is a habit, each instance of gentleness making the next one easier, until compassion becomes the natural motion of the soul. Aristotle saw the human being as a creature of rhythm. We wait, we act, we choose. And in choosing again and again, we slowly become. Our inner selves are shaped not by the extraordinary days, but by the countless ordinary ones. Days when we are tired. Days when we are frustrated. Days when we doubt ourselves. These are the crucibles where character is formed. To him, the world was not divided between good people and bad people. It was divided between those who practiced virtue and those who practiced something else. Every action, every reaction, lay brick by brick into the foundation of who we are. If we practice anger, we become angry. If we practice fear, we become fearful. If we practice honesty, kindness, steadiness, these two take root. And this, Aristotle believed, was liberating. It meant the self was not fixed, not doomed, not trapped by childhood or fate or temperament. One could change, not instantly, not magically, but through the gentle accumulation of better choices. A meaningful life was built like a quiet journey, step by step. He compared the shaping of character to the training of an athlete. A runner is not made by running once, or even by running well. A runner is made by running consistently. And the soul is much the same. Strength grows where it is exercised. Weakness grows where it is indulged. The path toward virtue is walked not through thought alone, but through repeated action. In this way, Aristotle asked us to look closely at our days, at our routines, at the small gestures that seem unimportant. How we speak to the people we love. How we treat strangers. How we respond when we feel threatened, embarrassed, or unseen. These moments create grooves in the mind, shaping instinct and identity. And over time, these grooves deepen into character. He urged his students to choose habits that uplifted them gently, rather than ones that pulled them slowly downward. Not habits that impressed others or performed virtue, but habits that nourished the inner life, the life of self-respect, clarity, and steadiness. Because to Aristotle, a meaningful life was not lived for applause. It was lived for harmony, the harmony between one's values and one's actions. Living well, he said, does not require perfection. It requires direction. If we fall, and we always do, the question is not how far we fell, but whether we return to the path, whether we turn our face again toward the person we hope to be. Habits allow that return. They are the bridge between intention and reality, small, repeating motions that slowly bring the inner world into alignment with the outer one. They help us live consciously even in the rush of our days. And when life becomes difficult or chaotic, habits act as anchors. A practiced kindness becomes natural. A practiced steadiness becomes instinctive. A practiced humility becomes a shield. But perhaps most importantly, Aristotle saw habits as a form of self-forgiveness. They acknowledged that change is slow, that growth is uneven, that humanity is imperfect. No one becomes wise in a day. No one becomes virtuous overnight. We move forward by repetition, by trying again, by practicing goodness the way one practices breathing, gently, consistently, without despair. He invited his students and us to think of ourselves not as finished beings, but as ongoing works. We are artists shaping our own character, sculptors forming our own soul. Every morning is a new chance to begin again. Every choice is a small brushstroke on the canvas of a life we are painting. And the masterpiece is not the final product, but the process itself. To live well, Aristotle said, is to embrace this slow becoming. To trust that small, deliberate habits can transform even the heaviest heart. To treat the shaping of the soul not as a burden, but as a quiet, lifelong craft. A good life is not an accident. It is a practice. A gentle, repeated, hopeful practice, shaping who we are, one choice at a time. When Aristotle turned his attention to the nature of human happiness, he paused longest on one subject, friendship. In a world of politics, ambition, and shifting fortunes, he believed that nothing shaped the human soul more deeply than the people we walk beside. Virtue, he said, is not practiced in isolation. Courage, generosity, honesty. These are not ideas floating in the mind, but living qualities grown through our relationships. And so he placed friendship, quietly but firmly, at the center of the meaningful life. He began by noting something simple. Not all friendships are the same. Some are thin and momentary, appearing like brief shadows on a sunny day. Others burn bright but fade quickly. And a few, very few, endure, shaping who we become. To understand this, he offered 3 kinds of friendship, each revealing a different way that human lives intertwine. The first, he said, is the friendship of utility. These are the connections built on usefulness, a merchant and his client, colleague and their coworker, 2 people helping one another because circumstances make it convenient. There's no shame in these bonds. They are necessary, practical, part of living in a community. But they are fragile. When the usefulness ends, the friendship dissolves. Aristotle did not judge them harshly. He simply recognized that they cannot be the foundation of a flourishing life. The second type he called the friendship of pleasure. Here the connection forms not because of necessity, but because of enjoyment. 2 people who laugh together, play together, share moments of joy. These friendships are warmer than those of utility, but they too have limits. They depend on the sweetness of the moment, on youth, shared hobbies, or a particular phase of life. When tastes change, when people grow, when life shifts its rhythm, these friendships often drift away. They are precious, yes, but impermanent, like petals carried by the wind. But it is the third type that Aristotle cherished most, the friendship of virtue. This, he said, is the highest good 2 human beings can offer each other. In this rare kind of bond, each friend sees the goodness in the other, not their usefulness, not their charm, but their character. They help each other grow, encouraging the best qualities, challenging the weaker ones, becoming mirrors that reflect one's highest potential. In virtue friendship, 2 people do not love what they can get from the other. They love who the other is. And because both are committed to living wisely, gently, courageously, the relationship becomes a shared journey toward the good life. These friendships are slow to form because character itself is slow to form. But once made, they are steady, resilient, anchored in something deeper than circumstance or pleasure. A friend is another self, Aristotle wrote, and he meant it. To care for a friend is to care for one's own soul. To harm a friend is to wound oneself. And to grow together is to experience a kind of happiness that cannot be found alone. Visuals slow to 2 figures walking beneath an olive grove, warm sunlight filtering through the leaves, soft earth beneath their feet. No hurried steps, no urgent dialogue, only companionship moving in rhythm with nature. In this gentle scene, we glimpse what Aristotle saw, the quiet power of walking beside someone who understands you. Friendship, for him, was not simply emotional comfort. It was moral companionship, a relationship in which both people become better because they are together. The goal is not agreement on all things, but alignment in essence, a shared pursuit of goodness, truth, and balance. This is why Aristotle insisted that the highest friendship requires virtue, not perfection, but the honest effort to live well. He knew how rare such friendships are. They demand time, patience, vulnerability, and the willingness to grow. They cannot be rushed. They cannot be manufactured. But when they appear, they become, as he described, the greatest external good, meaning the most valuable gift the world outside ourselves can offer. In a moment of reflection, the voiceover softens. A meaningful life is shared. Even the wisest path feels empty when walked alone. Aristotle believed that even the pursuit of virtue becomes easier, gentler, more real when done with a friend. Encouragement makes discipline lighter. Shared joy makes pleasure deeper. Honest conversation makes reflection clearer. And grief, when divided, becomes bearable. He also understood that relationships shape the self continuously. Spend time with the angry, and you will learn anger. Spend time with the generous, and you will learn generosity. Human beings are porous. We absorb each other. This is why the choice of friends is not a small decision, but a moral one. They become part of our character, part of the architecture of our soul. In this way, Aristotle's philosophy of friendship becomes a guide not just for the mind, but for the heart. If you want to live well, he said, walk with those who help you become your best self. Not those who flatter you, nor those who use you, nor those who distract you, but those who challenge you kindly, who remind you of your values, who call you back to your better nature. He knew, too, that friendship requires reciprocity. Virtue friendship is not a gift given from one side. It is a dance, each supporting the other, each committed to the same moral horizon. It is a companionship built on equality, respect, and trust. And because it is based on character, not circumstance, it survives hardship, distance, aging, and change. In the later years of his life, Aristotle himself relied on such friendships, with fellow scholars at the Lyceum, with students who became lifelong companions, with thinkers who walked alongside him as both colleagues and confidants. Through them, he discovered that meaning is not a solitary achievement, but a shared creation. As the visuals fade to the olive trees again, the final line arrives in a gentle whisper. In the end, the good life is not a destination. It is the company you keep along the way. Aristotle's vision of eudaimonia is subtle, profound, and quietly revolutionary. Often translated simply as happiness, eudaimonia encompasses something far more enduring than transient joy or fleeting pleasure. It is the flourishing of the soul, a state of being in which one lives in accordance with reason, virtue, and the deeper currents of human nature. It is neither a momentary emotion nor a reward to be claimed after a series of fortunate events. Rather, it is the culmination of a life lived deliberately, thoughtfully, and in alignment with one's own potential. Eudaimonia, in Aristotle's philosophy, is about becoming fully human, fully present, fully engaged, fully responsible for oneself and for the world one inhabits. To live well, Aristotle teaches, is to cultivate habits that shape our character over time. Virtue is not a theoretical concept or a set of abstract rules. It is a practice, a pattern of repeated actions, a series of small, deliberate choices that accumulate to form a life of integrity. Courage, temperance, generosity, honesty, and wisdom are not innate gifts to be possessed at birth. They are cultivated, exercised, and refined through conscious effort and reflection. The human soul, Aristotle insists, is malleable, like clay that absorbs the imprint of every action, every decision, every intention. One becomes what one repeatedly does. Excellence is not a goal achieved overnight. It is the quiet accumulation of ethical acts, thoughtful reflection, and moral awareness woven together into the fabric of daily life. In this framework, eudaimonia is inseparable from virtue. It is not simply about personal satisfaction or comfort, nor about the accumulation of wealth, power, or prestige. The good life is measured by the depth, coherence, and moral quality of one's character, and by the ways in which one's actions contribute to the flourishing of others. Aristotle emphasizes that humans are social creatures, naturally drawn into communities, families, friendships, and civic life. Our relationships are not incidental. They are integral to the realization of eudaimonia. Living well requires engagement with others, not retreat into isolation. Each act of generosity, each gesture of kindness, each decision to act ethically in the face of temptation or difficulty strengthens both the individual and the community, creating ripples of virtue that extend far beyond the self. The concept of the golden mean complements this understanding of eudaimonia. Virtue, Aristotle reminds us, exists between extremes. Courage lies between recklessness and cowardice, generosity between wastefulness and miserliness, patience between indifference and obsession. Life unfolds in the practice of moderation and discernment, in the careful calibration of desires, impulses, and judgments. By seeking balance in our thoughts and actions, we cultivate the conditions for true flourishing. Eudaimonia, then, is not a reward for excess, nor a solace for the timid. It is a product of measured, thoughtful engagement with life, where one learns to navigate the tensions of existence with wisdom, patience, and awareness. Aristotle also emphasizes that eudaimonia is a form of activity, not mere contemplation. A good life is not passive. It is dynamic and engaged. It is expressed in action, ethical choices, intellectual pursuits, and participation in society. One cannot achieve eudaimonia simply by wishing it into being or by avoiding life's challenges. It emerges through disciplined practice, conscious reflection, and ethical responsiveness. It is found in the steady cultivation of habits that shape character, in the mindful engagement with one's responsibilities, and in the courageous exercise of reason and judgment. Each day offers the opportunity to act virtuously, to make decisions that reinforce moral integrity, and to live in harmony with the principles that nourish the soul. Importantly, eudaimonia is not a rigid formula, a uniform prescription, or a one-size-fits-all model of the good life. Aristotle recognizes the complexity and diversity of human circumstances. Each individual must consider their own capacities, temperament, and context. Flourishing is not about imitation or comparison. It is about realizing one's own potential, acting in accordance with one's own nature, and aligning one's choices with the pursuit of virtue. The good life is personal and particular, yet it resonates universally because it is grounded in the shared human capacity for reason, reflection, and ethical action. In contemplating eudaimonia, we are reminded that life's meaning is constructed, not granted. It is not found in fleeting pleasures, the applause of society, or the accumulation of material success. It arises through the conscious integration of thought, habit, and action, through the cultivation of virtues that refine the soul and foster connection with others. To live well is to recognize the interplay between individual responsibility and communal belonging, between personal excellence and the broader tapestry of human life. Aristotle's philosophies suggest that fulfillment is inseparable from both self-awareness and ethical engagement with the world. A calm, reflective voiceover might underscore this. Eudaimonia is not a feeling. It is not a fleeting joy or a momentary delight. It is a way of being, a continuous practice of thought, choice, and action that shapes the character and the soul. It is the alignment of our intentions with virtue, of our habits with wisdom, of our lives with the principles that sustain human flourishing. The visual imagery could linger on small acts of everyday virtue: hands tending an olive tree, a teacher patiently guiding a child, neighbors sharing bread under the shade of a warm afternoon. These are the quiet expressions of the good life, the tangible manifestations of a soul in harmony with itself and the world. Eudaimonia is also deeply connected to reflection and contemplation. Aristotle values the life of study, observation, and reasoned inquiry. To understand oneself, to examine one's choices, and to cultivate wisdom is to participate in a higher form of life. This reflective dimension does not remove one from ethical responsibility. Rather, it enriches it. Thoughtfulness allows us to act with clarity, to choose the right mean between extremes, and to respond to challenges with insight and composure. By harmonizing action and reflection, we create a life of depth and coherence, where external events are met with internal steadiness, and where our ethical commitments guide our engagement with the world. In sum, eudaimonia is the culmination of Aristotle's philosophy, a life in which virtues are practiced, reflection is cultivated, friendships are cherished, and actions are measured against the standard of ethical excellence. It is not a destination to be reached suddenly, nor a state bestowed by fortune. It is the ongoing result of deliberate living, conscientious choice, and mindful engagement with one's own nature and the world around us. By seeking balance, practicing virtue, and fostering meaningful relationships, we create a life that resonates with purpose and quiet fulfillment. Ultimately, Aristotle teaches that living well is both an art and a discipline. It is the practice of shaping the soul through thoughtful habits, the conscious exercise of moral and intellectual capacities, and the careful stewardship of one's own life. Eudaimonia is neither external nor accidental. It is cultivated through attention, patience, and care. A life of flourishing emerges not through grand gestures or sudden epiphanies, but through the accumulation of small, deliberate choices, each reinforcing the character, wisdom, and virtue of the person. The soul, nurtured in this way, comes to embody harmony, clarity, and ethical integrity. The final, gentle reflection, accompanied by slow, sunlit visuals of olive groves, courtyards, and quiet human interactions, might echo in the voiceover. Eudaimonia is not a feeling. It is not fleeting. It is a way of being. A life in which thought, action, and virtue converge. A life where the soul, through deliberate choice and quiet reflection, find harmony within itself and with the world. To live well is to live fully, thoughtfully, and ethically, to flourish in the fullest sense of what it means to be human. Aristotle reminds us gently that the good life is not perfect. Eudaimonia, as he envisions it, is not a flawless achievement, nor a destination reached once and for all. It is a journey, a slow unfolding, an ongoing cultivation of character and wisdom. No person lives entirely without error, nor acts entirely without misjudgment. Each day brings choices, some aligned with virtue, some falling short, some uncertain. It is in the delicate balance of these choices, in the quiet attention to our intentions and actions, that the soul gradually shapes itself. The path toward flourishing is not linear. There are setbacks, distractions, moments of doubt, and times when we fail to act in accordance with what we know to be right. Yet these moments are not merely obstacles. They are part of the practice, part of the education of the soul. Through missteps, the conscience sharpens. Through reflection on errors, understanding deepens. Through patience, character solidifies. The good life, Aristotle teaches, is therefore inseparable from humility. To live well is to acknowledge our limitations, to recognize that we are works in progress, and to approach each day with a willingness to learn and grow. Humility is not weakness. It is the quiet acknowledgement that our knowledge is partial, our perspective incomplete, and our capacity for virtue requires cultivation. With humility comes the patience to persevere, to continue refining our habits, and to allow the rhythms of life to shape us gently over time. It is a patient tending of the soul, like a gardener who does not force flowers to bloom, but waters, prunes, and nourishes, trusting in the gradual unfolding of life cycles. Forgiveness, too, plays a vital role in Aristotle's vision of becoming. We forgive ourselves for our shortcomings, recognizing that the pursuit of virtue is a lifelong endeavor. We forgive others, understanding that they, too, are navigating their own journeys, shaped by circumstance, habit, and opportunity. Compassion emerges not only as a social virtue, but as a necessary practice for our own eudaimonia. By cultivating patience and forgiveness, we create the space in which growth is possible. We learn to embrace the imperfections of life, the unpredictability of circumstance, and the inevitability of human error. In doing so, we release the paralyzing weight of expectation and perfection, opening ourselves to the gentle unfolding of who we are meant to become. Visual imagery underscores this philosophy. A quiet courtyard bathed in the soft glow of sunset, olive trees casting long, calm shadows over stone paths, a single figure walking slowly, observing the interplay of light and time. These images mirror the rhythm of a life shaped by reflection, deliberate choice, and ethical attention. The day draws to a close, yet the work of living, learning, and growing continues. The beauty of the world, its intricate balance, and the quiet lessons it offers remind us that becoming is not a frantic pursuit but a gradual alignment with the principles that nourish the soul. Aristotle's emphasis on gradual development also highlights the importance of patience with ourselves. Virtue is not achieved in sudden leaps, nor through isolated acts of heroism. It is shaped in the ordinary daily practices of life. The courage to speak truth when it is uncomfortable, the generosity to give without expectation, the diligence to cultivate understanding, and the consistency to choose moderation over excess. These small, repeated actions accumulate over time, forming the habits that define character. By approaching life in this way, we honor the slow, unfolding rhythm of personal growth and recognize that meaningful development requires both time and attentiveness. Becoming, in Aristotle's philosophy, is inseparable from self-awareness. To grow toward eudaimonia, one must observe one's own choices, reflect upon the effects of actions, and remain mindful of the trajectory of one's life. Each moment offers the opportunity to align intentions with virtue, to act with deliberation, and to nurture the qualities that lead to flourishing. The process of self-examination is not a critique meant to induce guilt or shame, but a gentle illumination of the paths that guide us toward greater harmony with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Aristotle's view is also profoundly compassionate. He recognizes that human life is frail, contingent, and shaped by forces beyond our control. Illness, loss, unforeseen circumstance, and the limitations of social and political structures all challenge the realization of a perfectly virtuous life. Yet these challenges are not reasons for despair. Rather, they are the conditions under which virtue, patience, and resilience are tested and strengthened. Through adversity, the soul's capacities for courage, wisdom, and compassion are exercised. Through imperfection, we gain the clarity to discern what matters, the insight to prioritize virtue, and the humility to accept the slow rhythm of our own becoming. As the sun sets over the courtyard, bathing the scene in amber light, the voiceover reflects, we are always becoming who we are meant to be. There is no final, flawless state of virtue, only the continuous cultivation of character, the patient tending of the soul, and the deliberate alignment of our choices with what is good, just, and true. Each day offers an opportunity to grow, to act wisely, to nurture others, and to refine the habits that shape who we are. In this slow, gentle unfolding, we find the quiet fulfillment that constitutes a life well lived. In this perspective, the journey toward the good life is inseparable from the acceptance of human limitation. It is an embrace of the process rather than fixation on an endpoint. Imperfection is not a flaw to be feared, but a natural condition to be understood and integrated. The patient, reflective individual learns to navigate life's complexities without the burden of unattainable perfection, finding joy and meaning in the ongoing work of ethical living. Each choice, however small, contributes to the architecture of character, and each reflection, however subtle, shapes the contours of the soul. Ultimately, Aristotle invites us to live with a mindful awareness of our own becoming. We are participants in a lifelong act of creation, shaping not only the external circumstances of our lives, but the internal quality of our hearts and minds. We learn to forgive ourselves, to forgive others, to act with courage and temperance, and to cultivate the habits that allow virtue to flourish. In this careful, deliberate practice, we move steadily toward eudaimonia, aware that the journey itself is the destination. The good life, then, is not a final achievement but a gradual, patient, and compassionate process of becoming. As the final light of day fades, the scene closes on the courtyard, quiet and still, the long shadows stretching over the stone paths. A gentle breeze stirs the olive trees, reminding us of the continuous flow of time, of the subtle rhythm in which growth occurs. The voiceover concludes softly, "We are always becoming." There is no perfect moment, no final summit, only the patient, deliberate unfolding of who we are meant to be. In every choice, every act of virtue, every reflection upon our lives, we participate in this quiet work of becoming, shaping ourselves with patience, humility, and care. The good life is not an arrival. It is a journey, gentle and deliberate, and it is ours to walk. As the final light of day softens, we are invited to pause and reflect. Aristotle's guidance is not a set of rigid rules, but a gentle reminder that wisdom is not something to be merely learned. It is something to be lived. To live well is to know yourself, to turn inward with honesty, observing your desires, your choices, and your intentions. It is to strengthen your character through the deliberate cultivation of virtue, shaping habits that gradually form the fabric of your soul. The good life is found in the practice of balance, in walking the middle path between extremes, and in acting with thoughtfulness and discernment. We are reminded that no one flourishes in isolation. A life of meaning is shared with friends who inspire, challenge, and accompany us on our journey. In these quiet, everyday actions, in the mindfulness of choice and the patience of self-cultivation, the soul finds harmony. Live with intention. Live with balance. Live well.